Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of the Ride Along Radio Show. My name is George Holt, police officer with 25 years in law enforcement. And to my left is Gil Contreras.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And to my right is Kent Lee.
That would be me. So I've been out of law enforcement for a few years, spent time in LA County doing law enforcement work. So now I'm able to say what I want to say.
Yeah, and as we say every week, that's the premise of this show is that you're going to get it unadulterated. You'll get it straight. We'll try to keep it clean, but it'll still be real. And we just have casual conversation about topics of mutual interest to the community and the police. We title the show Ride Along Radio because the idea is that you're rolling in a police car with three police veterans. And between the three of us, you'll find a breadth of experience and a breadth of opinions. And the cool part is that we all work together as police officers too at some point or another. So our relationship goes way back, and we have some shared experience there, and we try to use that to bring it to the audience there in a way that they can relate to. So that's the show. We always start off with a news of the day segment. Our news of the day segment actually kind of segues into our topic of the day.
It became the story of the week.
It did actually, and you know it's such a big story that there was no way we could just confine it to the news of the day segment. We had to make sure that we could actually spend some time on it because we've only got an hour.
Right.
And it's going to take a lot more than that actually to really get where we want to go. But we can get part of the way there. So we're combining news of the day with the topic of the day. And the news of the day segment is, of course, the Spring Valley High School incident in South Carolina. And Gil, I'll let you kick that off.
Well, do we have a clip? Or are we going to be showing the clip?
We do.
Okay.
We have a clip.
Okay. So in a moment, I'm going to have the producer run the clip here. But there was a deputy sheriff working at a high school earlier this weekend. When I saw the story and I saw kind of the uproar about the officer's actions, it kind of reminded me of a conversation that we had last week about, a cop saying another cop said a bad word. And I was just sitting here stunned saying, well, this is just police work. I kind of had the same reaction when I saw the deputy, wrestling with the girl. I was like, okay, this is police work. This is which is what you do when people won't cooperate. And so, but anyways, a high school student was a female, African-American girl. And the officer, of course, is white. So, in my opinion, this is what makes it a big story or a bigger story. And so I wondered what the uproar was about, and there's a couple of videos out there, and I don't know, is this angle one or angle two?
This is the angle where you can see the interaction between them, or is it like? Well, let's run it and see.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and run the tape now, and then we'll talk about it when we come back.
Okay, so we've all seen the tape a million times by now. There's two angles, and I tell everybody, do yourself a favor and watch both angles before you make a decision on how you feel about this, because you really need to see both in order to have a complete picture. And if that doesn't change your opinion, it doesn't. That's fine, but just get as much information as you can before you move forward.
Right, and I just want to say that the media ran with the one angle where you can't see what the female is doing. So from that angle, the video from that angle, it makes it look like the officer walked up to her and then just tipped her over, and then pulled her out of the tipped over chair and then slid her across the floor there, and that's not actually what happened. So so what did happen was you have a female student who's in class, and like every other school. And I remember when my daughter was in high school, I remember getting a call saying, "Hey, can you come to the office today because we took your daughter's cell phone during class." And this really made me angry because she knows she's not supposed to use her phone during classroom time. She pulled it out to do. She had a story about, well, but Dad, I just needed to whatever she needed to do. The point is, she was out of policy, and so they took her phone. And my daughter didn't fight with anybody. She didn't call anybody names. She didn't sit in her chair and say, "No, I'm not following the policy," because she knew when she got home, if she had done that, when she got home, there was going to be heck to pay. And so this is what this girl did. She sat there and she pulled out her cell phone. The teacher tried to get her to put it away. She wouldn't. So when she wouldn't comply, then she says, "Okay, well then you have to go. Get out of my classroom, go to the office. Trying to teach a class here." She says, "No, I'm not going." So they get into it about that. So then the teacher doesn't know what to do. So what does he do? He calls the office and gets an administrator. Now, I don't know if administrator means principal or vice principal, but I'm assuming
I heard principal, but it's somebody from the administration.
It was the vice principal in charge of discipline, probably.
Oh, okay. So here comes the administrator. He walks in and tells her, okay, he tells her, what happened? Oh, okay, well, she won't get out. She's using our phone. Okay, so, sorry, sweetie, you got to go. Let's go. Come to the office. She says no. Now, if the teacher and the principal can't get this kid to comply, then what they did was they said, well, if you don't get out of the chair, we're going to call the school resource officer.
And you know what that means?
Well, that means the police.
Right.
That's right.
The
Right.
police.
You know what that
It's
means.
a deputy
Exactly.
sheriff.
Yeah, it's not a security guard,
Right.
and it's not an unarmed guy in a polo shirt, with minimal training. It's a fully authorized deputy sheriff. So they call him. He comes to the classroom, and like all good cops, when you get to somewhere, he says, "Hey, what do you got? What happened?" So they tell him the story. He looks at the girl and says, "Okay, hey, back up. In case she fights, you got to clear the area, right? Hey, everybody move." People tried to make the fact that he even told people to get out of the way, people tried to make that racial. Like, oh, he already knew what he was going to. He didn't know what he was going to do. As police officers, all you can do is respond to what's happening in front of you in the moment that it's happening.
Or not respond. You have that option too.
Well, I don't know.
Most people would call that dereliction of duty, but
it depends on what it
at
is.
times there may be something that you want to bow out of.
Yeah, it may be. But
This wasn't it.
In this case, this is a kid. This is a defiant kid.
Right.
And
Right. Well, hold on a second. Find a penal code section where that's a violation of being a defiant kid.
That's not the point.
No, it should be the point. You just said as a police officer, you have to act.
Yeah, but when
there's a violation of
when
law.
you get a radio call, and he got called over there, when you get a radio call, there has to be a legal disposition to that call.
Right.
That means that you have to do something.
Yeah,
So this is what he. Let me
sure.
finish telling the story.
Sure.
So what he did was he told the girl to get out of the chair. She didn't want to. Okay, well now who does he call? If you're 911, who do you call? There's nobody to call. And I've heard people say, well, he should have called for backup. Okay, 9721 requested backup. Roger, en route.
For what?
Okay.
For what exactly?
Okay, so now, backup's en route. Now I can't do nothing till my backup gets here? What kind of, I don't even know what kind of police work that is. That's not police work.
And how would that have necessarily changed things?
Well,
you don't even know
it wouldn't
that.
have changed anything.
It'd have been two guys dragging her across.
But eventually
it would have changed. There was a lot of decision points here.
Wait a second. So let me just finish this.
Okay,
story.
go ahead.
So the officer tells her to get out of the chair. She doesn't. He tells students that he think might be in the way if there's a fight. Tells them to get back. They do, and then proceeds to tell her to get out of the chair. She won't get out of the chair. And I've said this all along, since we started this show, and even before on my blogs and writings and stuff that I do, because I am an award-winning journalist in addition to being a former officer. I said that police work is ugly. It's messy, and when you use force, it doesn't look pretty. The interesting thing to me, though, as an observer of these issues, is that we've come to a different place in American society where we've decided, well, I haven't, but society has decided, at least part of it, has decided that any use of force by law enforcement is excessive. And it isn't. There's a very big difference between use of force and then excessive use of force, or, quote, police brutality, close quote. And so the officer tried to get her out. He tried to pull her out of the chair. She hangs onto the chair, but as she hung onto the chair, she actually grabbed his pant leg. And as they're struggling, the desk begins to tip over because it's a chair and desk attached to each other. It tips over, and as it's going down, she kicks at him and she tries to punch him. Now that's a crime. That's
Right.
battery on a police
At that
officer.
point, you have a crime.
The order to get up and the refusal to do it is a crime.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. It's a 148. You're refusing a lawful order. Yes, it is.
Hold on. 148, California Penal Code Section 148, which is Kent's referring to, is resisting or delaying a peace officer.
That's
Obstructing.
not all the language that's there.
But I gave a short version like you did. But the peace officer has to be in the performance of their duties as a peace officer.
I picked it out. I picked out the specific
You can't
part.
show up at Krispy Kreme and tell somebody get out of the seat. I want to sit there, and they don't do it as 148.
That's not what
You got to
happened.
be within the performance of your duties
He
as a peace
was.
officer.
Which is what he was doing.
Well, that's what's questionable to me, and I believe that's why he got fired. I believe that's why he got fired.
Well, I believe he got fired because the sheriff is probably taking
Political
political pressure.
There's no doubt about that.
They don't want a Baltimore to show. So, hey, we're going to have an investigation. We're not haven't even looked at the videos. We're just going to decide the officer.
Well, he looked at the videos, but there was no time to do a straight-up investigation like it should have been done. There's no way that investigation got done that quickly and it was fair and impartial. No way.
That's right. And I hope the officer, I hope he sues the county, the school district, the sheriff's department, the sheriff, and the parents of that kid.
Okay, well, good luck on suing the parents of the kid for a couple of reasons. But, my position on this, and this is just having been a supervisor at a couple different agencies, having been in law enforcement for almost 25 years, there are things that is your job as a police officer to do, and there are things that is not your job to do. People call the police for all kind of stupid stuff. People have called the police because their lights were out in their house. Well, I don't know why you're calling the police about that, but okay.
Right.
There's other people you call about that.
Yeah, the general public's not very bright.
Okay.
Correct.
So there's a bunch of decision points here where things went wrong. Now, I was always taught, and I remember one day being told this specifically by someone, that there are three situations in society where one person is in charge of the situation. Those three situations are the pilot of an aircraft, the captain of a ship, and a teacher in a classroom. So when the teacher gave that order for that kid to put the phone away and the kid didn't do it, the kid's wrong. I mean, there's no defending her actions. There's no defending her actions at any point during this. And for anybody to try to defend her actions is wrong because she's out of pocket. I've heard anybody say that what she did was okay. And I hope I don't hear that.
No, but wait, let me just interject here. What you do hear is, so what if she didn't want to obey orders?
Right.
She's just a kid.
Sure. Now she's 18 years old, by the way, but she's a high school student, and she gets treated as a student.
Juvenile.
So where I'm going with that is the teacher is supposed to enforce discipline in that class because she's violating a rule, not a law. Okay?
School policy, correct.
Their school policy. All right. If that fails, then the teacher is supposed to go get an administrator.
Right.
Okay? And the administrator is supposed to come deal with this.
Who is a male black?
No, it doesn't make any difference who it is. No, it doesn't make a difference in terms of the legal ramifications of this. Societal and political, sure.
It does in this case because we're crying racism now for everything. Everything is racism today if it has anything to do with anybody who's African American.
Well, you know what? That's just the pendulum swinging the other way because for so long you couldn't cry racism even when it was. So that's just the pendulum swinging the other way. It has to get to the middle.
I don't know.
It'll work itself out. That's just where we are right now, and I think everybody knows that's why we're there. But that's just where we are, and it's not right, and it'll sort itself out. So the teacher didn't exert control in the classroom. The teacher got an administrator. The administrator didn't exert control in the classroom.
Well, now, how is that exactly? How did they not exert control? How did they not tell her what to do before she didn't comply? What loss of control did they have?
Because there's other steps. There is a school disciplinary system in place. There's detention, there's suspension, and there's expulsion, right?
If she won't get out of the chair,
they're disrupting the class.
All right.
What do you do with that? I mean,
so when the officer, hold on a second. So when the officer left, had the class been disrupted, or was class okay after the officer left?
It was disrupted before he got there.
All right. So what I'm saying is, it's already disrupted.
Right.
You deal with that person in a way. First of all, let's get to that. This is where I'm going with that. Okay, and stay with me. Remember now, supervisor at 2 different police agencies here. Supervisor for 16 years total. Okay. When you get to a scene, people call you for anything. As a police officer, you have to determine whether this is something that warrants police involvement or not.
Right.
At this point, she is breaking the rules of the school. There is an internal school disciplinary system, and the unfortunate part of the school resource officer program is that these principals, these administrators, want to use these officers as bouncers for the classrooms. Instead of that officer saying, this isn't a police matter, I'm not going to set one shiny black boot into that classroom and get involved in this. And that's where he went wrong, in my opinion, because anything you do after that is suspect. Anything you do after that, you're going to be considered to be wrong. And I bet you when those termination papers come out, because the sheriff said it himself, that this was a situation that the police shouldn't have even been involved in. Since when do we use the police to enforce school rules? The police enforce the penal code. vehicle code, health and safety code, welfare and institutions code, city municipal codes, right?
Right.
We don't enforce school policies. So for her to say, I don't want to give up my cell phone, for her to be a defiant kid, what law is she breaking? If no law is being broken, why is law enforcement involved?
So you're saying that the deputy should have gone over there and did what I said he probably did and say, hey, what happened? What do you got here?
What happened?
What do you got?
Yes.
And then when they told him, are you saying that he should have said, oh, sorry, this is not a police matter, I'm out of here?
How do you know that wasn't the sheriff's policy? How do you know that wasn't the sheriff department policy for school resource officers?
The sheriff himself said the deputy shouldn't have been involved in this.
No, what he said is what he said. What is the
Yeah.
policy of the sheriff's department for the school
Well, I can
resource
only go on what
officer?
came out of the sheriff's mouth on national TV, which is that it's not an issue
well,
for the...
he fired him without any due process. So how's that? I
Well,
mean,
he did, and that's another section. But I want to get to that in a second. So my point is that officer should not have gotten himself involved in that. You see this anytime there's an in-house officer, anytime people have to, anything they can foist off onto the police, they want to. Okay, and they'll do it. I've seen it at the airport where the airlines want to use the airport police as bouncers if they have a customer that's upset about the way they're being treated.
What should the officer have done?
The officer should have said.
He gets called to a
the officer should have said, you know what? Maybe. I don't think the officer should have told the administrator how to enforce school policy. The administrator doesn't know that you can call that kid's parents. If the administrator doesn't know that this is something for them to deal with within their purview without getting the police involved, then I don't know what the officer should do about that.
So the whole classroom has to come to a halt?
It came to a halt anyway.
Yeah, I know that, but because the kid doesn't want to comply with the teacher or the principal?
That's why the officer shouldn't have got involved, because here's what I'm saying.
Does she just get to sit there and scroll through her phone?
I guess so, and then she won't be there tomorrow because she'll be suspended and sitting at home.
There is something called 415. Wow. Okay? The situation at the airport that you were just discussing, going off and getting bad service and being disruptive, that's called 415.
Sure, and they're in a public place. When it reaches 415, which is disturbing the peace for the people outside of law enforcement outside of California.
Was she not? She was in a public school. It was a public place. Was she not being 415?
I didn't hear anything about her being 415. I heard that she didn't want to give up her phone.
Can you be 415 by refusing a lawful order from a police officer?
Is it a lawful order? We get back to that. This is what I'm saying. What's the lawful order? He's enforcing a school rule. That's not a law.
She's 415.
She's 415 because she doesn't want to give up her cell phone?
She's 415 because she's not complying and she's causing a
right here on the air
in the classroom.
Find me that penal code section that says that.
I'll go in my pocket and get a $100 bill. Doesn't have to say anything about a kid in a classroom. It says 415, and that can be applied in many different ways. You possibly include all the scenarios in the penal code section.
415 against who, though?
415 against all the other people there. There's a victim. The victim is everybody around them. That's
415 is disturbing the peace.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Hold on a second. Disturbing the peace is when you're boisterous and you're using profanity.
You don't have to be boisterous and be profane. Be profane. You do not have to do that. 415 doesn't say exactly how you have to.
Disturbance, right?
That's exactly right.
So then a jury would look at that and ask who caused the disturbance. She doesn't want to give up her phone.
She did.
And that disturbed, okay, that's a real stretch. That's a real stretch. And again, the officer should not have gotten involved in that. And here's why I say that. Now let's step inside the psyche of a police officer here for a second. Let's step back into our roles as police officers. You know that you've got somebody who's not listening to the teacher. They're not listening to the administrator, whether that's the principal or vice principal. If you step in there in your uniform, you have to think, what options do I have at my disposal if the person doesn't listen to me? Okay? Can I lawfully make an arrest if this person doesn't listen to me about this thing? Because the last thing you want as a police officer is to step into that classroom, especially an indigenous community resource or school resource officer who has to work that campus every day. The last thing you need to do is step into that classroom and appear to be impotent because you couldn't do something because the person said, I'm not gonna do what you say do. Okay? So you don't get involved in situations if you're not going to take action, if you don't have options available to you, especially if you don't need to get involved in that situation. Let me tell you something. That officer, I can guarantee you, when that officer stepped into that classroom and she didn't listen to him either, he felt like he was being punked. He felt like this is someplace, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I'm the police, and I'm telling you what you're supposed to do. Well, now, there's this thing we have, as the acronym is ATOM, the word atom, like atom bomb. Ask, tell, order, make. So at a certain point, you feel like I'm going to make this person do this, okay? And what happened is this result that we have now. And all the officer had to do was not get involved in that situation. I feel that officer should not have gotten involved, because anything you do after that, now we can talk about the level of force that he used and whether he used excessive force or whether he used the minimal amount of force necessary. But had he not set his foot in that classroom in the first place, as he should not have done, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Now we're getting into the Ferguson effect, and this is the beginning of it.
No. I'm not. This is pre-Ferguson. There's things you just don't get yourself involved in.
Well, I don't see.
What are you getting involved in that for?
I didn't see a problem.
When are you a bouncer for the school?
I did. A bouncer?
This is what it was after Columbine and other incidents on schools that say, hey, we can't have unarmed security people. We need guys with guns. But we can't have armed security guys because we don't really trust their training. So we got to have cops. We need cops on campus.
Right.
They're not there just to be officer friendly and stand around. When something has to get done and the teachers and the administrators can't handle it, that's why the officer is there. He's there as he's there as an additional resource to that school.
What's the acronym for police officer we use? LEO, right? LEO is what we use for officers, police officers. What's the L stand for? Say it. What's the L stand for? It stands for law. Law enforcement officer.
Right.
If you're not breaking the law, the police have no business contacting
you. All right, let's go with the acronym SRO. What does that stand for?
School Resource Officer.
Thank you very much. You're an additional resource on the school campus to help the administrators when things get out of hand.
And you also enforce public school policy while you're there as well.
And that's your job.
It's just not. It is just not a legal issue, a criminal legal issue.
Enforce. It's called the Education Code. I left that one out earlier. Again, you're not turning your cell phone off in class does not rise to the level of a criminal action.
No, 415 does.
But 415 is subjective as hell.
Oh, well, guess what? What do you think law enforcement is half the time?
But I said subjective as hell, and I guarantee you that officer...
415 may be subjective. Battery on a peace officer is not.
Right. Now, let's get to that part. Okay.
And the reasonable of this getting from the phone to noncompliance to refusing a lawful order to now a battery is within the reasonableness factor of a police officer doing what he's supposed to be doing.
And I said it from the very beginning. She's wrong. I will not defend her one iota in terms of what she did. I'm focusing on what the police officer did. So now that you've got yourself in this, now that you've interjected yourself into this mess that should have stayed in the classroom.
He was called. He got a radio call.
Yeah, but you had a choice to go in that classroom and deal with it or not. You do. You have a choice to deal with that or not. It's called discretion.
Well, you know what? Right? In a minute, we're going to bring our guest up here who ran a security for a school here in South Los Angeles. And I'm going to let him say whether you have an option. If the teacher says, hey, come to my classroom, I'm having a problem. Well, what kind of problem is it? Oh, yeah, well, we don't really do that. Sorry. And walk away.
It would be like this. No, I'm not coming.
Yeah.
No. You show up. You show up. You're responsive. You find out what's going on, and you either get involved in it or you don't.
Well, you can't be Chico in the man. It's not my job.
and they say you need to get rid of this guy here because he's not helping us here in our
All right. Well, you know what? They got rid of him anyway.
Well, we have our guest. So we're going to bring him in a minute.
We're going to break. I'm going to give out the number. So I want you guys to call in. Feel free to call in and speak on this after the break. The area code is 323. The number is 293-3375.
You can also tweet us. You don't even know the number.
I know. You can also tweet us at Right Along Radio. You can send us an email at rightalongradioshow@gmail.com. Once again, that phone number is 323-293-3375. And we're going to bring our guest in to join the fray after this break. See you in a second. All right, and welcome back to the Right Along Radio Show. Call-in number is 323-293-3375. You can tweet us at Right Along Radio. So we're back from the break. Today's topic is the South Carolina classroom incident at the high school incident where the school resource officer came in and there was an application of force to deal with a student that had been disruptive in the classroom. So we have a guest who's got some expertise in this subject.
Yeah. So this is a guest. This is Eddie Goodman. Eddie, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Because I know Eddie moved some stuff around this morning to be a part of the discussion. I appreciate that. Eddie is he's the chief of a security company called CRST, and they used to do security at Locke High School, which is in Watts in Los Angeles. And it was taken over by a charter school, broken up into 4 campuses, had a student population of about 4,000, of which 2,000 were admitted gang members. So it was a tough campus to work, and Eddie and his crew went, they got the contract to go in there. And they were it was the first time I ever seen armed security officers on a school campus. Right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, and I'll let Eddie talk more about this, about what they did and how they did it, but it was the first time I'd ever seen armed officers who looked like deputy sheriffs to me, and were driving around in marked vehicles through safe passage or something, and actually patrolling around the school, responding to radio calls, doing pet stops, making arrests out on the street, and then they would transport them back to the school, and then the deputy sheriff assigned to the campus would make the arrest and take the body. So tell us a little bit about CRST and what you guys did at Locke High School.
Yeah, well, basically, like you said, we was working at Locke prior to it being taken over by a charter school when it was with LUSD, and then when the charter school came, they decided to go ahead and keep us and employ about 15 officers.
Okay.
And so when we first started, we started off working with LAUSD school police, and then it transitioned from a charter school. Then we started working with the LA County Sheriff Department, which is a charter school.
Now, could Green Dot have kept the LAUSD PD there?
They did for a little bit, but I guess they just wasn't too happy with with them.
So they weren't happy with the service they were getting from the department. Do you know why? Do you know why that was? Or if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, I do. We had one good officer that was really good, that had a rapport with the students, who used the community policing approach where it wasn't all about just using force and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they liked that. And he would get a lot of things done without having to use force. And so school police moved him. And when they moved him, they said, hey, this guy was good. You brought this other guy in. We don't like his attitude, don't like the way he's interacting with students. If you bring that guy back, then we'll be happy and we can continue the service. They refused to bring the officer back.
The school police.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
then that would warrant them to go ahead and contract with the LA County Sheriff Department.
Okay. So tell us about CRST and what you guys did over there. I mean, how were you guys, under what charter did you guys fall under to allow armed security officers to patrol city streets and actually interact with students and sometimes use force on students on campus?
Okay. So on campus, because it was switched over to a charter school has the autonomy to, hire private security. It can be armed or unarmed. Okay?
Oh, okay.
All right. So when it was LAUSD, no, we wasn't armed. Okay. So we played a different role when it was LAUSD.
Okay.
But when it switched over to a charter school, they was allowed to be able to bring armed officers because it was actually a charter school.
Okay.
Okay. And so basically what we did, we would just back up the police. You know what I mean? Like, we was under the authority.
Well, that's the one deputy, though.
Yeah. We would assist him in doing what he needed. Like, if he say, "Hey, we finna stop these guys and check them out," we would just assist him. So it was under his authority that we was able to operate by assisting him with some of the,
Yeah, on campus
contests.
and off campus?
Yes.
And was some special arrangement with the city of LA to have armed security officers in vehicles on city streets?
Okay, so by doing safe passage is you can under the education code, you can do 1,000 feet from the school. So we participated in safe passage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That gets around the police commission, because typically the police commission has to give you a exemption that you can ride around in a car with and be armed and do your duties there. So that's actually a good.
Now, I used to teach at a vocational college, and a lot of my former students who graduated actually went to work for you and work over at Locke High School. And what they described to me was it was like police work to me. The kind of incidents they were getting involved in. So, so I want to kind of tie this to the incident that we're talking about. And when either the deputy sheriff or you guys got a call to a classroom about a disruptive student, did you have the option to listen and go, oh, well, okay, I don't really hear a crime here. It's more of an administrative thing. We're not going to do anything and leave. Can you do that?
Okay, so let me shine some light on this. I think with the whole situation and the reason why stuff worked so well at Locke is because of the training that everybody got, from the teachers to the deputy to us. We was all on the same page, so when certain things happened, we knew what to do. So to answer your question, yes. So a lot of times they wouldn't even call us for certain things like that, because I have to agree with
George.
With George, that if it's not something legally, what is your ground to enforce something that's just a school rule? And what happens is, we know kids get defiant. We know that they want to fight back or whatever the case may be. So you're just putting yourself in a situation, like George said, that you shouldn't even been in that situation, because now you have to justify. Because when I used to train my guys, I used to say, whenever you dealing with like a school rule, at the end of the day, they're going to ask you, well, what was the justification that started? Okay, like for this instance, the girl refused to give her phone. That's nothing that you really want to get into where you have to start using force and you end up hurting someone. And then, it's like the girl now is claiming that she broke her leg and all this kind of stuff. And now they're about to sue and, and get paid and whatnot, whatever. And so the teacher knew not to even call us for that kind of stuff. The only reason why we would get involved if it was like a fight, like if the kid was being violent, they was in there fighting.
That's a crime, though.
Yeah, right. And if they was destroying school property.
Another crime.
It had to be in something that was serious enough to warn us to come over there and have to deal with it. Dealing with being what we call it's called willful defiant is what it's called. Kid was just being willful defiant. Just didn't want to listen and whatnot. And I had to agree, once again, we didn't like to go into those kind of situations because if the kid doesn't listen to you, then all the kids will look at you like, oh, he's nothing. We don't have to listen to them. Exactly. Whatever. So what happens is it kind of breaks down our authority figure because we getting caught up in stuff that we shouldn't get caught up in. And now when we have to really use force, that's something that's legit. It muddies the waters a little bit. So.
And you're going to feel in a situation like that, I can't get punked like that in front of all these kids that see me every day. I got to do something.
Exactly. And his ego got involved, and he was like, no, you got to get up. And so usually what could have happened was, like, if she just refused to go, I mean, because they done this at schools and stuff, whatever, they could have suspended her and gave her paperwork and said, okay, you're now suspended. So once
at the end of the school day, I agree. But what do you do in that moment when everybody's standing around?
They could have they could suspend. You could be suspended
on the spot.
Okay, so if you won't comply, and I say, you know what, you're suspended.
No, so what they get?
And I say, okay, I'm suspended.
No, so how it works?
Now what?
Now how it works is this.
Now you're trespassing, though, because now your status as a student at that school has been suspended.
Exactly.
And you no longer have a lawful right to be there, so now you're trespassing.
Okay.
So now the police can get involved.
So that's pretty subjective. I don't know about that, George.
That's how that
I don't
gets
know
done.
where that's going.
Well, we brought the expert in.
Yeah,
we brought the expert in. I can't help if he agrees with me.
I know the penal code section myself. I don't know about that.
Look up 602 for trespass.
You know what? You know why you're here today saying that, well, how things could have been happened, and we could have said pretty please over and over and over
again. He did, though.
But you know why the policy is the way it is? It is because of what's happened to our society. Now it affects you too. And 20 years ago, you would have said, the teacher would have said, get up out of your chair, go to the principal's office.
Right.
They would have gone just like that. And if
there were no cops, and if
they didn't go, the vice principal, maybe even the teacher, would have picked you up and dumped you out of your chair and dragged you across the floor.
I don't know if that was ever happening at lot.
And then when I don't know if that was ever happening at lot. Wait a second. And then when you got to the office at Lincoln High School, at least they used
the paddle comes out with holes drilled in it, and then your parents came and your dad kicked your ass. Okay, so. This is where we're at.
But I think what Eddie said is very important, and I think this was the breakdown that George is trying to allude to here. What you said was that the teachers, the administrators, your department, and the deputy, everybody was on the same page, and everybody. Right. So you didn't even get called for stuff that had nothing to do with you guys, and that's the difference. Right. That's the difference.
It is a difference,
and that's why
it's a big difference.
And again, as a police officer, you have wide latitude, you have discretion. As a police, and think about this. His security company had a contract with the charter school, which means they were actually employees, indirect employees of the charter school, and they still didn't have to do that. So as a police officer working for the county, you certainly don't have to do what a principal tells you to do or face insubordination. Now, maybe somebody won't be too happy with you about it. Maybe you won't work there next semester. But you're not facing insubordination charges because some civilian is telling you to do something and you're falling back on your latitude of discretion as a peace officer, not getting involved.
No, but
that guy didn't have to get involved in this. I guarantee you, we could call him up right now. He'd tell you he wish he hadn't gotten involved.
They could just say, see you later. They make a call to the department and say, you know what, we really don't want this guy
right,
anymore.
But you're still a deputy,
send it somebody else. Well, what did he do wrong? Well, we just don't think that he's doing the right thing. And how does that reflect on...
I want to ask Eddie a question real quick. Were there ever times in the time that you had Locke High School, and it was a tricky population to work with. Yeah. Were there ever times when you guys actually got called to a classroom and you actually said, well, wait a second now, we don't really do this. This is not our, you better call the deputy or you better call somebody else because we're not going to go in and deal with that. Did you ever have instances like that?
Yeah, in the beginning, they would, like you said, they would call you, for stuff. See, they supposed to be trained in conflict resolution, which we train our officers in classroom management. And so a lot of times they will call you for stuff that really they should be taken care of. And yes, if what I usually do is I'll call the teacher out the class. I wouldn't do it in front of the student.
Right.
I'll call them out. So once again, if I make a decision not to get involved, the kids won't see it. Then they can do the proper channels and bring the people in that they're supposed to do. So I'll pull them and I'll say, what's going on? And they'll explain. If it's something I feel like we shouldn't have got involved in, then yeah, I would like, you need to just call the principal because we can't get involved in that. And then just let him call the principal and let them deal with it. But I will say this, like one time a kid ran off the campus and it was a vice principal came. It was like, hey, go grab that kid and bring him back to me. And first I was like, well, what did he do? I'm not going to go chasing after the kid.
Right.
I got to find out, does he have a weapon? What did he do?
Sure. That's for your own safety, if nothing else.
Yeah. So what happened? Give me some facts of what's going on here. Oh, he ran out on detention. Well, that's not against the law, right?
Right.
Right. Just because he ran out on detention, like you were saying, they try to use us as bouncers. And like I said, if I go chase him,
well, I think that is a crime. I think truancy probably falls into that.
It was after school.
It doesn't matter if you're there for school business and you're supposed to be there and you leave, then you're truant.
But for us, for security, like I told her, I'm not chasing him only because if I chase after him, he runs down the middle of the street, get hit by a car, I'm liable. The school is liable. You know who he is. Just call his parents and say,
that's the thing. It's a I hate to say captive population, but you know who people are.
Right.
You can deal with that.
Exactly. You know who he is. Just call his parent. Media call his mom and dad. Let them know that he ran off from detention or whatever.
And now he's got another week of detention or something.
Exactly.
You showed him.
Well, you know what? As opposed to now what happened? Now there's a cop sitting at home without a job.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of negative publicity on the school.
Right.
Right? And that's because all these decision points along the way, bad decisions were made, and now we have something fresh to talk about today. So thank you guys for that. But in terms of what should have happened in that community, that wasn't the way to handle it, man. And I just say that, again, just based on, and never having worked in a school environment, but having worked in a specialized environment at an airport where I see the propensity of civilians to, when they can call on the police all the time because you're there, they'll call on the police all the time because you're there, and they expect you to take their side. Even though you're supposed to come down right in the middle and figure out what's supposed to happen as opposed to what they want to happen. So
do you agree, Eddie, that that the deputy should have just gone into the classroom like he was called? He should have gone there and he should have just said, "Yeah, this is not a crime. This is not a criminal thing. I don't know what you guys are going to do, but." There's nothing. I can't help you do anything. I mean, as a school resource officer, you're the reason they even have the word resource in the term in your title is because you're an additional resource to the school administrator. School administrators run the school, and you're there as another resource, but you have some legal authority to to enforce laws as well.
Laws, right? But you're a resource. You bring the resources that are vested in you by your authority as a peace officer. Right. You're not a resource for everything. They'll have you changing light bulbs. Well, you're not a resource for everything.
Well, that's silly. Of course, of course you're not going to change light bulbs.
But I'm just saying,
hey,
about resources.
Can you take out the trash? Oh yeah, you're going to get me a coffee.
Decaf or regular, right?
Run, do that.
So exactly. Run, go get.
Of course.
So that's what I'm saying. So
not the kind of resource I'm talking about.
But you bring the resources that you bring.
You bring the resources of the sheriff's
delineated, right?
Or the police department.
Right.
Those are the resources you bring to that.
And those resources are. If there's somebody that needs to be arrested, if a kid's locker needs to be searched, if somebody if it needs to be escorted, if you need to pull security at a football game, that's the resources you bring.
Can I get an answer to my question? Should the deputy, in your view, based on your experience and training in working, especially at Locke High School, do you think the deputy should have just said, "Hey, sorry, I can't help you here"?
Not in front of the kids. I mean,
we wouldn't hurt Johnny's feelings, right?
I wouldn't have done it in front.
No, because it undermines the authority of the teacher.
I don't.
But do you think the deputy should have pulled the teacher and the administrator into the hallway and said, "Hey, you don't have a legal problem here. I'm not doing anything"?
I think that he should have told them, "There's no legal issue here, and if I go in there and try to forcefully take the phone, we're gonna have a problem here. Because once I get involved and I start trying to physically take this phone from her or remove her from the classroom." It's not. I don't think he should have done it.
So as a school resource officer, I would have walked in there with what we're talking about. I said,
we got to take a phone call.
She obviously doesn't want to leave, and I can't do anything. I'm powerless. So why don't you just remove the entire class and take them into another room?
That's something somebody suggested last night when I was talking about that.
And I was just kidding. Do you see
somebody
how
did suggest
desperate
that.
things have gotten?
No, but somebody suggested that, and I guarantee they wish that had happened. We have a phone call, actually.
People think that's a great idea.
Let's take the caller.
Absolutely.
Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Pete Steimer, and I'm calling from Northern Nevada.
Hello, Pete Steimer from Northern Nevada.
How are you, George?
All right. Speak
I have
on
a question. Why would the trespass law not apply as soon as the student was ordered out of the room? Why would there have to be a formal or paperwork done for them to be put on suspension before trespass took effect?
Because that student has the legal status to be there, and in fact, as Kent just brought up a minute ago, Kent, you can't have it both ways.
I am.
As Kent brought it up earlier, if the student leaves, they're truant, right? That's
Right.
because they're supposed to be there.
But
so
if
until you suspend that status,
by an administrator, wouldn't that? I mean, doesn't that apply?
They would have been ordered off, not off the school, but into the office so that an adult can come pick them up. And by the way, you don't have to fill out a form to advise somebody of trespassing. You just need to simply advise them.
But you see, that's if that person is a diner at a restaurant or a patron or a shopper or someplace.
Everybody's got a legal right to be there if they're eating, but at some point the legal purpose changes and now you're not invited.
You can ask that person to leave, but that student is enrolled in the classroom.
It doesn't matter.
The student, the diner can get up and walk out whenever they want. The kid can't get up and walk out whenever they want. If they do that, they're truant. They're violating the law you brought up earlier.
Nobody said leave the school campus by themselves. I just said go to the principal's office. No, what I'm saying is
she asked. I'm answering the question, which is why would a simple order of saying, "Hey, you're trespassing now," not be enough? Is because that student is enrolled there in the school. They have a right to be there until you revoke that by an order of suspension.
I'm advising you that you're trespassing if you don't get up and remove yourself from the classroom and go with the vice principal to the office where you're going to be met and you're going to be escorted off the premises. Is totally legal and completely legitimate. There's nothing wrong with that.
If that was the case, how come they didn't do that?
And can I
didn't say that. She wants to know. She's the one that brought the scenario up.
I'm answering the question because the student's enrolled in the class. The student's an enrolled student. They have a right to be there.
Can I get your input on her question?
Hey, Pete, thank you for calling.
What they used to do is what the principal would go back or the vice principal, do the paperwork, fill it out, do the suspension form, whatever.
But no, I understand. But I want to get back to get back to his point for a second.
No,
if in the classroom, if the student is being defiant to the administrator, to the principal of the school, in that moment, is that some sort of violation? Is that a policy violation of any kind that then she can say, okay, officer, I need you to do something because I've exhausted all of my...
Is it in writing in school policy? And does it jive with
You guys keep saying the word policy. I haven't heard the word law yet. Okay. I keep hearing policy.
Okay, so a policy is something that you just hope people follow the rules. Now, sometimes, occasionally...
Well, you don't hope. They have to.
Well, what I'm saying, but they don't have to, just like this girl did. She knew
they do have to, or there's consequences.
Right. She knew she didn't supposed to have the phone, but she didn't give a damn. She was like, I don't care. I'm going to use my phone, and no one's going to tell me what to do. Okay, so when you get to the point where she's just willful defiant and don't want to listen, no, you can't just go in there and say, you're now trespassing, you got to get out of here.
No, but the principal, if the administrator of the school says to a student, hey, I need you to do this, and they say, F you, I'm not doing anything, and I'm just going to update my Facebook status, that's got to be a violation of something.
It is.
It is. It's a school rule violation.
Right.
It is.
Right.
It's now stepped into the legal realm, too.
Okay, now you don't want to listen to me? You're not no more welcome on my campus anymore. I'm going to suspend you. Prepare the paperwork. Once they prepare the paperwork, they walk over to say, now you are suspended. You need to get off my campus. Now, at that point...
So do you think all of that should have happened before the deputy put hands on?
Yes, because legally now it's justificable because now you're trespassing.
Bam.
You have been suspended. Get off my campus. We didn't contact your parents. You free to leave. Boom. Get out
now
of here.
Our law's been broken.
Now
there's a law to enforce.
Now if she refuses to leave, now he could put hands on her and it could be justifiable.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
Are you waiting for a response?
I am.
That's the introduction to this whole matter being legal or not? School policy determines whether there's a legal order that's being issued by that person?
No.
Does school policy have to come first before he says You're violating the law. Stand up and get out.
Trespassing has to come first.
Wait a minute. Let him answer it.
What law did she break?
She refused a lawful order.
From who?
The police officer.
No. Before the police officer even gets there and steps into the classroom, what law did she break for the police officer to get involved? He ain't got a crystal ball. He can't say she's going to break the law.
She's 415.
Nobody said that, Kent. You're extrapolating.
I don't have to read this in the newspaper to know that she was 415.
Nobody
I saw the video.
I don't know. Nobody said that, man.
That's why we have a radio show.
We got a break. Feel free to call in after the break, 323-293-3375, or you can send us a tweet at Right Along Radio. All right, and welcome back to the Ride Along Radio Show here on the Morris Media Network. As it so happens, we have a phone call waiting on us.
If you'd like to.
We had a phone call waiting on us. Caller, go ahead and call back, 323-293-3375. We were talking about, again, the South Carolina classroom incident at Spring Valley High School, where the deputy entered the classroom, and there was a use of force that ensued, and it's been all over the media. I'm sure everybody watching this now or later is familiar with that case.
Right.
And we've had a special guest in-studio guest, Eddie Goodman, who is a school public safety expert. And we appreciate you lending your expertise and your credibility on that, man. There's a lot of nuances there. And when you talk about the education code, that's something that a lot of people who are not in that realm don't really understand. None of us, we all had school campuses that were next to the housing projects we worked in. Right. But we always had school police there or school resource officers that we didn't really have to get involved too much in campuses. So this actually was good to get your insight on that. We need to cover this probably more in depth, because this is a whole nother subject that kind of leads us to what we call the Ferguson effect, which is the incidents like this. Do we have officers that then start slowing their roll and start slowing down their level of productivity because they don't want to end up on YouTube? They don't want to end up on CNN. They don't want to end up fired in 2 days after the incident. And let me say this. Anybody on any side of this, whether you think the student was totally in the wrong, whether you think the deputy was totally in the wrong, or if you feel like I do, that there's enough blame to go around, no one should be happy about this deputy being fired so quickly without getting due process.
That's right.
We've got a caller. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, how you doing, George? This is Chuck calling from Baltimore.
Hey, Chuck.
How you doing?
All right. What's up?
I was calling because it seems everyone's putting the blame on a child. Even though she's 18, she's still a child. But no one seems to be holding or wanting to hold the administration or the police responsible for their acts. If the police are acting the same way as minors are acting, then what's the difference?
Well, Chuck, I think that officer is being held responsible for his actions. Probably,
no, I'm not, I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't mean, I'm talking about by the panel. And I kind of
no. We were talking about that. Well, I was at least talking about that in terms of that officer being held responsible. I totally get what you're saying but now again, Chuck, I feel that there's enough blame to go around. Let's make no mistake. Had she done what she was supposed to do, had she been behaving like you're supposed to behave in a school setting, we wouldn't be here. However, we wouldn't be talking about that if what happened next hadn't happened either, right? So that's almost irrelevant at this point, what she did.
I would like to see some blame passed around to the parents, probably parent of that girl. That's where a lot of blame was.
Remember earlier I said there's some issue there. She lost her parent. She's been orphaned.
Right. Oh, she has been. Okay.
Yeah, that's why she was new at the school and everything else.
Chuck's trying to make a point here.
I'm sorry, Chuck. Go ahead.
No, and that's what I was going to say, and I have to take exception with something that Kent's been saying all the entire episode.
Get him, Chuck.
About following rules and things of that nature.
That was Gil, actually.
No, I'm sorry. The gentleman and the...
This is Kent. To my right, this is Chuck. This is Chuck. Chuck's on the air. This is Gil to my left, and that's Eddie over there to Gil's left.
And he means Kent. You got the right guy, Chuck.
Is it me?
Go ahead.
Yes, Kent.
Go ahead,
okay.
Chuck. That's the right guy.
Right, when you were talking about rules and policies, but in the episode last week when you were talking about behind the blue badge or...
Right, the code of silence.
You made a statement how you personally witnessed an officer do something wrong and against procedure, but you stated that you didn't report that officer because you were looking for your own, you were trying to sort of defending, I don't want to say, but you were taking up and looking out for your own career.
He said his own survival, I think was the word he used, in terms of his own survival.
Yeah, well, there are lots of reasons for that, and I'm not sure all of it has to do with refusing to report somebody for something. If you'll notice at the very end, I made a comment, or maybe it was after the show, that I said... We had a long
discussion after the show. We stayed for like 45 minutes after
What's
the show.
What's your point, Chuck?
Well, my point is that it seems that, and what I'm hearing is that the police, you're not holding, every time that someone states, George and the guest made a point, you always back it up with, well, if she would have done this, or she would have done that. But you're not holding, police are trained professionals. You have guidelines that you're supposed to follow. If you can't discern what to do in the situation, then you're no different than a person hired off the street and gets given a gun.
Well, Chuck, actually, I can defend just about everything that I do. You may not like it, and there may be some policy that I violated, but I will defend everything that I do, and I don't have a problem doing that, because policies aren't always descriptive in terms of how things happen in the field. I may have to put a bump on somebody's head that wasn't called for as far as policy is concerned, but I knew that I had to put a bump on his head to end a problem that I was about ready to face. And that problem is a situation where I'm going to lose control. And I can see it.
Control the situation, not yourself.
Not everybody else can see what I'm seeing, but I see it, because I'm on the streets and I have to deal with this on a daily basis. So I may go not A, B, C, D. I may go from A to D, and it may look very abrupt, but I know it's getting ready to happen to me, and I don't need a department policy standing in my way to remedy the situation before I end up in the hospital. This is a very difficult thing, and when you're on the other side and you're not in law enforcement, you don't see the nitty-gritty about how things go down. It's very, very difficult for you to completely understand everything that's happening. It just doesn't. I sympathize with you, because I was on your side of the fence before I was on my side of the fence, and now I'm back on your side of the fence again. And I can tell you that it is not exactly how you think you see things. I could tell you stories, and if you're standing with me and I'm saying, can you see this? And you say, yes, I do. It's like profiling, and I see a white person. When I see a white person coming in here and I'm racially profiling because they're white, everybody that's of color says, oh, yeah, well, they're coming in here to buy rock, and we know that because they're white. Well,
that's
racial
wrong,
profiling.
It's still wrong.
It is not wrong.
Yeah, sure it is.
It's right.
It's legally wrong. It's wrong.
Right.
It's two left shoes.
It's completely right.
It may be effective, but it's wrong.
Chuck, I appreciate that question. I don't know if I've answered you completely, because I don't know if I can in a limited amount of time. Love to have a conversation with you about it, though.
Hey, Chuck, thanks for the call, man. We appreciate you.
All right.
You know, one thing Chuck said, and I wanted to touch on that, and we're going to have to wrap here in a second, is that all these decision points, you had the student who should have made different choices, no doubt. Mm-hmm. You had the teacher who had really, if the teacher runs out of option, the teacher's going to go get the administrator.
Right.
Then the administrator gets there. The administrator is the one who's got the most options, because the administrator's got the rule book, the administrator's got the power to suspend or do something like call the police in. But I still don't hold that administrator to the same level of critical thinking and problem-solving abilities I do a sworn, trained, equipped peace officer.
Oh, I do. If they're advanced degree,
they don't have the ability. They can't take anybody's freedom. They don't have the ability to take somebody's freedom or their life.
Absolutely.
So I don't hold them to the same standard. It would be nice if they did have that kind of judgment, but they don't make life and death decisions. So I don't expect them to have that same level of. It's not as important that they do. The mistakes they make can be undone. But that police officer shows up. I expect that police officer to have the judgment and the discernment, to use a word Chuck just introduced in the conversation.
I think school districts
make a better decision.
I think school districts make all sorts of policies that they decide to make on their own because of this neat little world that they live in. And when things start to unravel and get out of control because of this, and they're part of this, they're contributing to it, then they're looking for an out. They are just as responsible for their actions and their decisions as anybody else. You know, but They have a PhD, for goodness sakes. I mean,
well,
they're
exactly.
Aren't they?
But you know what? And that's another reason for them to call the police, because now the liability has been shifted on to the police department. Everybody knows that police officer's name. Can somebody name the teacher or the vice principal? Nobody can name them because they shifted that liability off.
And those people,
and
by the way, they thought that the officer's force was totally justified, by the way.
Well, they're not police officer experts any more than Chuck was.
No, they're just a reasonable person seeing that there's a problem.
You just got through saying that on that side of the fence you may not understand. They're on that side of the fence, so their opinion has no credibility any more than what Chuck credence then.
Right. And maybe on a jury. And obviously it does.
And they had the teacher especially. He has daily contact with this kid. This is obviously
the kid was new.
This is an ongoing thing.
No, the kid was new.
The people in the classroom didn't even move. Everybody sat in their chair.
Here comes.
The kid was new at that school.
Get the phone out.
That's why you got to know the background of that, because the kid was new at that school based on the situation which left her orphaned. She was in foster care and she just moved into that school. So there was no long history there. Also,
was that her first day in his class?
I don't think it was the first day, but she was new in school.
Thank you very much.
So, we don't know what had happened prior to that.
Thank you very much.
It only takes 24 hours to figure out whether somebody has got a problem.
So here's what I'm saying. That officer knows what his job is and what it isn't better than the administrator will ever know. So that's my point, is that officer should have said, I'm not going to do that, and here's why.
So should he have been fired, George?
No, not for the use of force, because I think the use of force was excessive, but it wasn't unnecessary. He was justified in using some force once he got to that point. My point is that he never should have gotten there.
But the fact
and
that
that's why he got fired, I can guarantee you.
But the fact
that
that
I can live with a little better. I can live with him being fired for getting himself involved in that and then the use of force, as opposed to just the use of force. Because the use of force is merely excessive, if anything.
I don't know if I even agree with that, actually.
Okay.
She got dragged across the floor because he brought. It's exactly what you do when you get somebody in an arm bar by the wrist. Is you pull them and you get them into an advantageous situation for yourself in a clear area, especially when you've got people around you.
It was excessive because if you have passive resistance, what do? What do you meet passive resistance with?
Pain compliance.
Pain compliance.
Right.
He skipped totally past pain compliance.
No, he didn't. He skipped past it when she tried to hit him.
No.
Yes.
She didn't hit him until he put his hands on her.
He grabbed the chair. He put his arm around her and he grabbed the chair.
Well, you got to watch the video.
He didn't put her in a stranglehold.
Hey, I'll tell you what. We could argue about this for another hour, but we're at the end of our showtime here. So, you know what? You guys feel free to leave comments on YouTube when you see this later. Feel free to drop by our Facebook page. Leave comments. You can tweet us comments. And we just got a tweet from OG Def Jeff. Thank you, sir, for the encouragement and the positive words. I see you. And you can follow us on Instagram at Right Along Radio Show. So I want to thank our guest for coming on through.
Eddie Goodman.
Eddie Goodman, thank you very much, sir, for your insight.
Eddie.
Thanks for coming
I want to thank the poetess as executive producer of our show for keeping the ship sailing tight. And thank you, intern Darren, for all that you do. Thank you, Kent, my co-host and longtime friend. And thank you, Gil, my co-host and longtime friend, for coming in and making this all happen. So we'll see you guys next week at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on the Morris Media Network. Be safe.